January 12th, and we're talking about facing fear. Fear doesn't disappear when we avoid it, actually grows stronger. And today we're going to explore what happens when fear is brought into the light rather than moralized or suppressed or handed off to authority, when you actually have the courage to face your fear. Hi, I'm Candy. I'm a hypnotherapist who's deconstructing from evangelical Christianity, and I know how mindset shapes our behavior. So in this series, I'm going to share my daily reflections from 3 different devotionals. The Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo, and that one's a little more spiritual, non-religious. Also, Jesus Calling by Sarah Young, which is a very modern Christian approach. And My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers, which is a very classic Christian angle. My goal is to help you see how each one of these devotionals or these day books might shape your mindset a little differently. And if you're into that kind of reflection, please like and follow for more. Let's get started. So for January 12th, in the Book of Awakening, Mark Nepo talks about how fear is strengthened when you avoid it, when you avoid looking at it. And he tells a story about a door in his house that he was always scared to go in. I think it was an attic door or something, just something where there was storage, and he was always afraid of it. And then one day he got up the courage to go in that door. And in the dark, he began to see boxes of things, and he found like pictures of his grandfather that he looks like, and he learned a lot about himself. And he tells this story to say that like looking directly at that fear can help loosen its grips. When you finally admit what is or what you're afraid of, facing that fear will reveal more about you. You might discover how resilient you are, or you might even recognize that you have some sort of maybe a prejudice or something that needs to be worked out. And it's not for shaming yourself, but to actually bring it to the surface and ask where it came from. You weren't born in the world with that. You weren't born in the world, thinking certain things about others that are actually lies that have been programmed into your subconscious, and you're carrying it with you. And so then you can work through that and begin to expose yourself more and more to that fear and watch it dissolve. Sometimes, though, we are truly victims of somebody or something, and naming that harm does matter. But staying trapped in the fear often comes from an avoidance, not danger. I'm talking like, let's say there is a situation where abuse is going on. The fear of the person, that the perpetrator, is one thing. That's danger. You are in a dangerous situation. The fear comes from when they threaten to do something to hurt you or others that you care about if you tell. That's where you face that fear. You face that fear. And that's scary. In Christianity, there were things that happened, and there was just a fear of the judgment of others, what people will perceive you as if you tell, a fear of shame, of experiencing shame. These are all normal human things to be afraid of. But when we face our fear, first of all, it relieves the nervous system of trying to constantly stay vigilant. And you can basically teach it that fear can be approached without being overwhelming by creating a sense of safety and then bringing something small to your mind. So one way you could do this is you could find a very quiet place, a safe place where you're not going to be disturbed, and you can bring to your mind a very safe environment mentally too. A place where you feel safe and calm, and notice the system feeling calm. Sit there, take a few grounding breaths, long exhales. By long exhales, I mean longer than your inhale. Get yourself really calm. Notice your environment physically and then mentally. When you're in that calm space, you can bring up something that you fear, something small that you fear, not a big thing. Just start with something small. Like, I have this strange fear of mice. I don't like them. And we had a mouse in our house, I think it was maybe a year or two ago. And I was so freaked out until my husband caught that thing. I did not want to stand on the floor. It was just irrational. And I've always kind of been this way with mice for whatever reason. And I was like, what is going on? Why? It's an animal and it's not going to like come up and charge me. It's, yeah, they carry diseases and stuff, but they're very skittish and, they're fearful. So I was like, what is going on? And what was funny is I began to just kind of imagine this little creature as a cartoon character, and it softened that fear. And then I started a garden last year, and I was out in the garden and I saw a little mouse come out, and he was up by our deck, and I was just watching him. And I even kind of talked to him, said a few things. I don't think he was pretty old, but it was just that fear kind of dissipated quite a bit. Now, I don't know. I haven't had another mouse, hopefully, in the house. That's just, I don't like that. But just staying in that state of being willing to face it, being willing to look at it rather than I can't be around it, and it just absorbs your mind. Instead, if you're like, okay, I'm going to look at this thing, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to allow myself to go there. I'm going to allow myself to go to the thought of the worst thing and then work through it. And that can calm the nervous system. It can calm your mind down from constantly projecting. So that is how the Book of Awakening teaches you to approach fear. Very human-centered, very empowering. Now, in Jesus Calling, there's kind of this idea that you naturally crave to know what's going to happen to you in a given day, right? You want to know your future, just so you can plan, right? But instead, you need to trust or let Jesus prepare you for the day rather than knowing what the day will bring. Let him prepare you for it so whatever happens, you're prepared for. And how you do this is you just stay in constant communion or communication with him. If your peace is disrupted at all, just whisper his name, and that's supposed to calm you down. I remember doing some of this kind of stuff, and I'm not going to say it didn't work at all, but that's because I had been programmed to believe that it would, and so my nervous system would respond to it because it's a program. That's all it is. It's not some magical thing that's happening that's calming you down. Even though we'll say, oh, that's Jesus then that calmed me down. No, your nervous system has been programmed to hear the word Jesus, and as you're talking to him, to feel calmer. So this is very feelings based too. I've noticed, like, if your emotions, if you start to feel a little less calm, you're going to then run to whisper the name Jesus, or, start talking to Jesus, which is, it's fine. It's a coping mechanism. But instead of like fearing those feelings, I would say, face the feelings. Why am I feeling this? You start to become curious. Why did my peace get disrupted? Why was I triggered here? And while being in the present moment matters, not being stuck to a plan, because plans get thrown off all the time. When you get like narrowly defining what you do in presence is you have to be talking to Jesus, saying Jesus's name. It's just becomes another way of spiritually bypassing things that might really be an opportunity to heal or to restore a relationship. Maybe it's an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody. And again, trusting God should not require suppressing your questions. You should be able to ask true. If something is strong enough, it can handle any questions that you have. It can handle you saying, I don't feel like this is, I feel I'm afraid. And instead of going, Jesus, 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 ask yourself why you're afraid. What is it you're afraid of? Because a lot of times we don't even know what we're afraid of. We just feel the physical system reacting to a situation. Maybe we feel anxiety around a certain person, or we feel anxiety in certain situations, and we want to run away from those. We're just constantly running away from the situation, or just saying Jesus, Jesus, Jesus over it and thinking something bad is there that we just can't see, but Jesus can see it. And that's not at all true. A lot of times it's just a program that is being triggered. And maybe you're not in, maybe you are in a safe situation, but it remembers it's something similar about it that your nervous system is picking up on to fire off those things and experience that you had where it wasn't so safe. And so it's got this memory, and that's where you can consciously bring in, I'm safe right now. I am safe. I'm okay. Or it's signaling there's something that you might be in danger and you need to listen and get going. But really, you need to do is listen to your own body. Your body's talking to you, not just saying Jesus to cover it up. And finally, in my utmost for his highest, this one is, I really did not like this one today, but it's basically saying you don't understand yourself the way God does. You can't. And before his grace began to work in you, you were harboring sin. Sin was being just, there's a lot of things you don't know about yourself. Now, while I would say that a lot of times we don't know ourselves, it's because we've uh, been programmed to adapt, to fit molds, to become something that we're not. And so who we are kind of gets covered up. And so whereas I would say you were born, you are one with source, and you came into this world one with source, just completely whole. You're not lacking anything. You're coming in with this um, ability to learn what it's like living here, and how, you know, how to feel things and experience those feelings. And people program you, not intentionally. Most of the time they're just, it's unintentional because they are blind to their own programming. So basically he's saying in this that you are completely unworthy of God, and he will take you to more and more suffering until you finally acknowledge this. If you do not acknowledge how unworthy you are, that's like the biggest sin. And until you do, he will keep taking you further and further into suffering. And I would say that's a big fat lie, because I used to believe that way. I used to believe I was so unworthy. And he said, once you realize how God sees you, you won't cry out, "Oh, I'm so unworthy," because will realize that that's just, you don't even need to say that. It's so obvious. But I don't believe that anymore. And whereas I've had some suffering in my life for sure, and I know that I will have more, and I still have things in my life that are not the most pleasant, um, my suffering is a lot less outside of that belief system, because I do feel that I'm worthy of God's love. I'm worthy of all the goodness and kindness in the world. I'm worthy of it because I'm one with source. I'm not separate. I'm not this being that is garbage. And neither are you. We are all one. We are connected. And when you understand that, you really begin to know yourself, and you begin to find out how wonderful you actually are. And it helps you understand others and how wonderful they are. And then you recognize when they are believing a program that is just garbage. So in the Book of Awakening, he basically tells you that fear, when you face it, it will lose its power. And Jesus calling, it's when there's fear, you call on Jesus. So it's just kind of like, it's not empowering. There's somebody else that will help you, right? Even though help does come in all sorts of forms, like you might get help from other people. It might even feel supernatural. But the help comes from you understanding. The truest courage is when you realize I can face this fear. You face it and you become empowered. It stops losing its grip. And so you're like, all right, what are my options here? You don't feel trapped anymore because you always have choice. There is always a choice. You might be trapped somewhere physically, but you have a choice on, if you say this is forever, you have a choice on whether um, you know, whether you sit and say, I'm doomed, or you say, there is a way out of here and I will find it. And that keeps you kind of in that mentality of looking. And in my utmost, it just basically, if you are in a state of fear, it's because in some way you're suffering because you thought you were worthy and you're not. So get with the program, recognize you're unworthy, and, maybe God will soften the suffering. So in my utmost thing, your unworthiness is like central to your identity. That is one of the core things in Christianity that I had to believe, that I was unworthy, that I was like an enemy of God. And I didn't feel like that. I didn't feel like an enemy of God, but I had to believe that it was true, that I deserved hell. I remember sitting in church and they're saying, you actually deserve hell. You are on your way to hell from conception on, or from birth, maybe they would have said. From birth on, you're on your way to hell. And the pastor I used to listen to or was in church with, when we started to deconstruct, was one of the scenes he would create was, okay, there's a sea of people and they're all screaming out for help. They're drowning and they deserve to be drowning. But God in his mercy reached down and he grabs those who believe, but not because they believe. He just picks some. So instead of being like, why is everybody drowning? You should ask, why did, like, wow, I feel so special. And this creates a whole lot of problems, this mindset. It creates a hierarchy, like I'm more special. And people will say, no, 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 you can't think you're more special than others, just like because you're unworthy. God did it, but you are kind of, because you're not doomed for hell and the rest of them are. And then that can also make you feel completely saddened, completely depressed, because you see loved ones who don't believe, and then they weren't chosen, and then it's hard to function because you're so distraught if you have a really empathetic nature. And that was something that I really struggled with, and I hated the thought of people going to hell. And then I began to realize I'm more empathetic than God. And there's something wrong with that. If God's, the most good and holy, why do I feel more empathetic than him? I don't know. Those are just thoughts I'm passing on, things for you to think about today. And take what you will, what resonates, and forget the rest. Remember, you get to decide what you devote your thinking to today. You might not be able to control every thought that comes in, but you can definitely decide what you entertain. And whether it comes from something I've said today or something completely different, choose wisely and set an intention that truly benefits you and those around you. And if you found any value here today, don't forget to like and follow. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and let's keep our minds on what helps us love ourselves and each other a little bit better every day.